Welcome to our channel, Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. It was meant to be a perfect wedding at the grand Whitmore estate. The sea was calm, the flowers were bright, and the guests were waiting for the beautiful bride, Eliza Hartwell. But an hour before the ceremony, she vanished. Her dress was left on the bed, the window was open, and only a small note remained. Now, Detective Clara Vance must uncover the truth. A truth buried deep in the past, filled with old secrets, lost love, and one terrible name. The morning was cool and quiet. The sun was soft over the sea. The big Whitmore house stood high on the cliff. It was old and gray, with many windows that looked out toward the water. Waves hit the rocks far below and made a deep sound. The air smelled of salt and flowers. It was the day of the wedding. Everyone in the house was busy. Servants hurried through the halls carrying ribbons and flowers. The garden was full of white chairs and golden cloth. People said this wedding would be the finest in the county. The Hartwell family was rich, and the Whitmore family even richer. The two families joining was big news. Upstairs, in a bright room with tall windows, Eliza Hartwell stood alone. She looked out at the sea. Her heart felt heavy, though the morning was beautiful. Her wedding dress lay across the bed. It was white and smooth, shining in the light. The veil hung on the chair. Beside it were shoes, gloves, and a small silver pin for her hair. Everything was ready. Eliza was 22. She was kind, polite, and quiet. People said she was lucky. Her groom, Thomas Whitmore, was handsome, charming, and heir to a great fortune. Everyone believed she would have a happy life. But inside her chest, there was a small, cold feeling she could not name. It had been there for days. A knock came at the door. "Come in," she said. Her maid Rose entered with a tray. "Good morning, miss. I brought tea and toast." Eliza smiled a little. "Thank you, Rose. Please leave it by the mirror." Rose set down the tray and looked at her kindly. "You must eat, miss. It's your wedding day. You don't want to faint?" "I'll eat soon," Eliza said. When Rose left, the room grew quiet again. Eliza sat by the mirror and stared at her reflection. Her eyes looked tired. She touched the smooth table and then opened the small drawer. Inside was a little brown box. She lifted it and placed it on the table. The box held 3 old letters tied with a blue ribbon. The paper was yellow and thin. The writing was faded brown. She had found these letters 2 weeks ago in the old chapel under the house. She had gone there by accident one afternoon, looking for a quiet place to think. A loose stone in the wall had moved, and behind it she had found the letters wrapped in cloth. She untied the ribbon and read the first one again. The words were shaky but clear. "I am writing because I am afraid. I cannot tell anyone. He is not who he says he is." The letter was signed Lydia Whitmore. Eliza had heard that name many times. Lydia Whitmore was Thomas's great-grandmother. People said she disappeared the night before her wedding more than 100 years ago. Some said she ran away with another man. Some said she fell from the cliffs. Some said she was never real at all. But Eliza knew Lydia had been real, and afraid. She read the second letter. "He smiles kindly, but there is something behind his eyes. If I do not return, remember that I tried to speak." Eliza folded the paper quickly. A cold wind seemed to pass through the room. She looked at her wedding dress and then back at the letters. The white silk seemed to glow like ice. A soft knock came again. "Come in," she said, hiding the letters. Thomas Whitmore stepped inside. He was not supposed to see her before the wedding, but he never cared much for rules. He looked cheerful, though a little pale. He held a white rose in his hand. "I couldn't wait," he said. "I wanted to see you. I brought you this. It came from the old greenhouse. My mother says it's from a plant that Lydia Whitmore once loved. It still blooms after all these years." Eliza took the rose. "It's beautiful," she said, though her voice was small. Thomas's eyes moved toward the mirror. "What's that box?" he asked. "Just some notes," she said quickly. "For your vows." "Yes," he smiled. "You look worried." "Don't be. Everything will be perfect today." He kissed her forehead. "In a few hours, you'll be my wife." When he left, the air felt heavy again. The rose in her hand was white, but one petal had a small red mark like a drop of blood. She laid it down on the table. Eliza opened the third letter. "If you are reading this, the truth must be told. A man may wear another man's name. A family may live with a lie. Do not walk to the altar. Her fingers shook. Under the letters lay a small sealed envelope with her own name, Eliza Hartwell, written on it. The writing looked the same as Lydia's. Her throat felt dry. How could that be? Lydia had died long before Eliza was born. She opened the envelope with care. Inside was a single line. You must not marry him. You will see his true face too late. Eliza pressed her hand to her mouth. Her heart beat fast. The letters trembled in her lap. She stood and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was white as the dress. Outside, she heard laughter and music. The guests had begun to arrive. Horses clattered on the stone path. A woman's voice called from below, full of joy. The wedding had begun to live without her. She walked to the small desk near the window. She took a clean card and began to write. Forgive me, Thomas. The truth must come out before vows are made. She set down the pen. Her hands were cold. She folded the note and left it beside the teacup. She looked at the wedding dress one last time. It was beautiful, almost glowing, but she could not wear it now. Not after what she had read. She went to the closet and took Rose's gray coat. It was simple and soft and smelled faintly of lavender. She slipped it on. The window latch was stiff. She pushed it open. The curtains blew around her. Cold air touched her face. She looked down. The ground was far, but there was a narrow stone ledge and an old drain pipe. She could climb down. She climbed carefully. Her hands held the cold metal. Her foot slipped once, but she caught herself. The wind pushed at her hair. Her skirt tore on a nail. At last she reached the grass below. She crouched behind a line of tall trees and waited. No one saw her. The back garden was quiet. She heard only the sea and the far sound of music from the front. She pulled the gray coat close around her. Her heart still beat fast, but she felt a strange calm. She looked up at the window she had left open. The white curtains moved softly, like hands waving goodbye. She turned and walked along the narrow path behind the house. It led toward the cliffs. Wild roses grew on both sides. The smell of salt grew stronger. Gulls cried overhead. The air felt colder now. At the end of the path was a small wooden door half hidden by ivy. It led to the old chapel under the house. Eliza had been there before when she found the letters. She pushed the door. It creaked and opened. Inside it was dark and cool. Dust floated in the air. The stone floor was uneven. A small window let in a line of gray light. At the far end stood a simple altar. On the wall behind it was a name carved deep into the stone, Lydia Whitmore. Eliza walked slowly to the altar. She touched the letters with her hand. The stone was cold. I understand now, she whispered. I believe you. Her voice echoed softly. She felt tears in her eyes. For a moment she thought she heard footsteps above her, faint and far away. But she stayed still. The sea roared below the cliff. The house stood silent above. Eliza knelt before the stone name and closed her eyes. She did not know what she would do next, only that she could not go back, not yet. The missing bride was gone before anyone knew she had left. The sun climbed higher, and the Whitmore estate came alive with sound. The garden was bright with guests in colorful clothes. White ribbons fluttered in the sea wind. Musicians played soft music, and people laughed, not knowing that the bride was gone. Rose, the maid, went upstairs with a smile. She carried a small box of hairpins and perfume. She knocked on the bride's door. There was no answer. She knocked again and called, "Miss Eliza? Are you ready?" No reply came. Rose opened the door a little and peeked inside. The room was quiet. The dress still lay neatly on the bed. The shoes were in place. The tea tray sat by the mirror. But the bride was gone. The window was open and the curtains moved in the wind. "Miss Eliza?" she called again. Her voice shook. She walked to the window and looked out. The drop below made her dizzy. No one could have jumped and lived. Yet the bride was nowhere to be seen. Her eyes fell on the vanity. The note beside the teacup caught her eye. Rose picked it up with shaking hands. The words were short and clear. "Forgive me, Thomas. The truth must come out before vows are made." The maid gasped and ran to the door. "Mr. Whitmore!" she cried. "Mr. Whitmore!" Within minutes, the house was in chaos. Guests whispered and turned their heads. The music stopped. Servants ran through the halls. Thomas came up the stairs 2 at a time. His face was pale. He looked around the room in disbelief. "Where is she?" he demanded. "No one knows, sir," Rose said. "She's gone. I found this." She handed him the note. He read it once, then again. His hands trembled. "This makes no sense," he said. "She was fine this morning." "She was happy." Rose could not answer. Tears filled her eyes. Downstairs, Eliza's father, Mr. Hartwell, was told what had happened. He came up quickly, his face red with worry. "Thomas, what is this nonsense?" "What do you mean she's gone?" "I don't know," Thomas said. "I came to see her early." She was calm. "She didn't say anything strange. Then I left, and now she's vanished." Mr. Hartwell looked at the open window. "You think she ran away?" Thomas's voice was sharp. "No, she wouldn't do that. Someone must have helped her or taken her." He turned to the butler. "Send men to the cliffs. Search the gardens. Every road, every path. She must be found." The butler hurried away. The guests stood on the lawn, watching the confusion with curious eyes. Someone whispered that the bride had fainted. Another said she had changed her mind. Someone else said she had been kidnapped. Soon the news spread beyond the estate. A young reporter from the Somerset Gazette, who had come to cover the wedding, rushed to the nearest telephone. Within an hour, people in the nearby village were already talking about the missing bride. Meanwhile, Eliza sat in the dark chapel beneath the house. The air was cold and damp. Her heart still beat fast, but her mind was clearer now. She had done what she had to do. The stone floor was rough under her hands. The only light came from the small window high in the wall. She looked up at it and saw the strip of sky. It was pale blue now, and the sound of the sea echoed softly through the stone walls. She knew they would be looking for her soon. Maybe they already were. She could not stay there long, but she needed to think. The letters in her pocket felt heavy. Lydia Whitmore's words repeated in her mind. "You will see his true face too late." Could it really be true? Could Thomas have done something terrible, just as Lydia's groom had long ago? It seemed impossible. Yet everything she had read pointed to something hidden, some family secret buried under money and pride. She walked slowly to the back of the chapel. There was another door there, smaller and older than the first. When she tried it, it opened with a creak. Beyond it was a narrow passage. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The passage smelled of earth and sea. The walls were damp, and her shoes slipped on the stones. She used her hands to steady herself. After a few minutes, she saw light ahead. The tunnel opened to the side of the cliff behind thick bushes. From there, she could see the endless water below. For a moment, she thought about running, just walking away down the coast road and never returning. But she couldn't. She needed answers. She needed to know what Lydia had tried to warn her about. She turned back and climbed up through another narrow path that led behind the stables. She kept low, hiding behind the stone wall. The estate was busy now, full of shouting and noise. Servants ran everywhere. She heard Thomas calling orders, his voice filled with fear and anger. Eliza waited until the yard was clear. Then she slipped inside the old carriage shed. Dust filled the air. Cobwebs hung from the beams. She sat on a wooden box and tried to breathe quietly. Her hands touched something cold beside her. It was a metal chest half covered by a cloth. Curious, she pulled the cloth away. The chest was locked, but the latch was old. With effort, she lifted it. Inside were stacks of papers, photographs, and a small leather book. She opened the book. The first page was marked Family Records, 1893. Names were written neatly in ink. Henry Whitmore, Lydia Whitmore, and others she didn't know. But halfway down the page, something caught her eye. The name Henry Whitmore had been crossed out, and beside it, in darker ink, another name was written over it. Edward Grayson. Her hands froze. Edward Grayson was Lydia's groom, the man she was supposed to marry before she disappeared. Why would his name be written over Henry's? She turned more pages. Each record had strange changes, names crossed out, rewritten, dates that didn't match. At the end of the book was a loose photograph. It showed two men who looked almost the same. One wore a military coat, the other a suit. Both had the same sharp eyes and smile. Underneath was written, Edward Grayson and Henry Whitmore, 1890. A chill ran through Eliza. The two men could have been twins. She thought of Thomas. His face, his eyes, he looked just like the men in the picture. Her heart pounded again. She closed the book quickly and placed it back. Her mind spun. Could the Whitmore family have taken another man's name long ago? Had they built their fortune on a lie? Before she could think more, a sound came from outside, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. She peeked through a crack in the wall. Two men were talking near the stables. She must be hiding somewhere close, one said. Mr. Whitmore's furious, said the other. He says she wouldn't run. He says someone scared her, Eliza's breath caught. She stayed still until their voices faded. She knew she could not stay hidden forever. Someone would find her sooner or later. But she could not go back yet, not until she had proof of the truth Lydia had tried to tell. She took one last look at the metal chest, then slipped quietly out the back door of the shed. The sky had turned gray again. Clouds gathered over the sea. The wind picked up. The first drops of rain began to fall. Eliza pulled her coat tighter and hurried down the path toward the village. She did not know where she was going, but she knew she could not stop now. Behind her, the great house stood tall on the cliff. The music had stopped. The guests were leaving. And Thomas Whitmore, standing in the empty garden, looked out at the sea with a face that no one could read. The rain began to fall harder as Eliza walked down the narrow path from the Whitmore estate. The gray coat clung to her arms, and her shoes sank into the wet ground. The wind from the sea pushed against her face, but she kept walking. She had to think clearly. She had to find a safe place. Behind her, the tall house stood like a shadow against the sky. The wedding guests had all gone now. The laughter and music had disappeared. Only the sea and the storm were left. Eliza reached the road that led to the village. A small cart passed by, and the driver slowed. "Are you all right, miss?" he asked. "Yes," Eliza said quickly. "I just need to get to the inn." "Hop on," he said kindly. "It's not far." She climbed onto the back of the cart and sat quietly as the rain hit the roof. The horses moved slowly, their hooves splashing in the puddles. The driver didn't ask questions, and she was glad. She looked down at her hands. The paper from Lydia's letters was still inside her pocket, a small, damp secret. The cart stopped outside a small inn near the village square. "Here we are," the driver said. "Thank you," Eliza said softly. She handed him a small coin from her pocket and went inside. The inn smelled of bread and smoke. A few travelers sat near the fire drying their coats. The innkeeper, a kind woman with round cheeks, looked up and smiled. "Good day, miss. You look cold. Can I get you tea?" "Yes, please," Eliza said. "And a quiet room, if you have one." The woman nodded and led her upstairs to a small room with a window that looked out over the rain-soaked fields. The room was simple but clean. Eliza thanked her and locked the door. She sat on the edge of the bed and took out the letters. They were damp now, and the ink had blurred in places. She spread them gently on the small table. Lydia's words seemed even sadder now. "He is not who he says he is," Eliza whispered. "What did you mean, Lydia? What did he do?" The room was quiet except for the sound of rain. She stared out the window. Somewhere far behind her, Thomas must have been searching. Maybe the police were there now. Maybe they would come looking for her soon. But she could not go back. Not yet. A soft knock came at her door. Eliza froze. "Who is it?" she asked. "It's Clara Vance," came the calm voice of a woman. "May I come in?" Eliza's heart jumped. She had seen Clara Vance once, talking to the guests at the estate. Clara was the detective the family had hired to keep order. Somehow she had found her already. Eliza opened the door slowly. Clara stood there, her coat wet from the rain. Her dark hair was tied back neatly. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "Miss Hartwell," she said. "You're safe." "That's good. May I come in?" Eliza stepped aside. Clara entered and shut the door gently behind her. "You left a note," she said. "Everyone at the house is worried sick. Thomas Whitmore looks ready to tear the cliffs apart searching for you." Eliza looked down. "I couldn't stay," she said softly. There's something wrong, Miss Vance. Something about the Whitmore family. I found letters, old letters from Lydia Whitmore. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly. Lydia Whitmore? The one who disappeared a century ago? Eliza nodded. Yes, I found her letters hidden in the old chapel. She wrote that her groom wasn't who he said he was. She was afraid of him. I thought it was just an old story, but now I'm not so sure. Clara took a chair and sat down. Do you have the letters? Eliza handed them to her. Clara read them carefully, her eyes moving slowly over each word. When she finished, she looked up. These are old, but the fear in them is real, she said. What made you believe they were about your fiancé? Eliza took a deep breath. Because I found something else. In a metal chest near the stables. It had old family papers. The name of Lydia's groom was Edward Grayson, but in the family record his name was crossed out and replaced with Henry Whitmore. There was a picture of two men, Edward and Henry. They looked almost the same. It's like one man took the other's name. Clara leaned back. That's strange indeed. If that's true, the Whitmore name may have started with a lie. Maybe Lydia found out, Eliza nodded. And maybe Thomas knows. Clara thought for a moment. If Thomas knows, he might want to keep it secret. A scandal like that could destroy the family's reputation. But that was a long time ago. What would it matter now? Eliza's eyes filled with worry. I don't know. But I'm afraid. Lydia said she saw his true face too late. What if the same thing is happening again? Clara's voice was calm. Do you think Thomas would harm you? Eliza looked away. He's been kind to me. But sometimes when he speaks about his family, his eyes change. Cold, like he's someone else. Clara stood up. All right, here's what we'll do. You'll stay here tonight? Don't go out. I'll go back to the house and look for that chest you mentioned. If it's still there, it might tell us something important. Eliza nodded slowly. You believe me? Clara smiled faintly. I believe that people don't run away from their own wedding for nothing. Get some rest. I'll be back before morning. When Clara left, the room felt bigger and emptier. Eliza sat by the window and watched the rain. The road outside was empty. A cart rolled by now and then, but no one looked up toward her window. Night came quickly. The wind grew louder and thunder rolled over the sea. Eliza tried to sleep but could not. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lydia's handwriting trembling on the page. At last, she lit the small lamp by the bed and took out her diary. She wrote quietly, I don't know if I did right or wrong by leaving. I only know I couldn't walk to that altar without knowing the truth. Lydia, whoever you were, I will find out what happened to you. She put down the pen and looked out at the dark sea. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Clara Vance returned to the chapel with a lantern. The rain had stopped, but everything was wet and cold. She walked slowly down the steps, her boots echoing on the stone. The air was still, heavy with damp earth. She searched every corner of the small chapel, then found the passage Eliza had described. It led to a hidden door behind the stables. She followed it carefully and came to the old carriage shed. There, under a dusty cloth, she found the metal chest. The lock was broken. Inside were the papers Eliza had described, birth records, names, and the old photograph. Clara studied it under the lantern light. The two men looked almost identical, but one detail made her stop. The man labeled Edward Grayson had a small scar on his left cheek. Clara touched the photo with her finger. She remembered something. Thomas Whitmore had a faint mark on the same place. She frowned and looked closer. The resemblance was too strong to be a coincidence. Interesting, she whispered. She closed the chest and looked around once more. On the floor near the chest lay a thin gold chain. She picked it up. A small pendant hung from it, shaped like a rose. Inside was a tiny photo of a woman, Eliza. Clara's face tightened. So he's been here, she said quietly. She turned off the lantern light and listened. In the silence, she heard faint footsteps outside the shed. Someone was there, moving slowly through the rain-soaked yard. Clara stayed still, waiting. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. Then a man's voice spoke softly through the darkness. Detective Vance, I believe you found something that belongs to me. Clara's hand moved to her coat pocket, where she kept her small pistol. She didn't answer. The voice came again, calm and cold. You shouldn't have come here alone. Clara Vance stood very still in the dark shed. The rain tapped softly on the roof. The air smelled of wet wood and dust. She did not move, only listened. The man's voice outside was calm, but something in it made her uneasy. She spoke carefully. "Who's there?" The door creaked open. Thomas Whitmore stepped inside. His dark coat was soaked and his hair clung to his forehead. His face was half in shadow. "Mr. Whitmore," Clara said quietly. "You should be at home. People are worried about you." Thomas smiled faintly. "People are always worried, but I came to look for my fiancée." Clara's eyes narrowed. "You think she's here?" "I think you know where she is," he said, his voice soft but sharp. "You spoke to her." "Don't bother to deny it. My men saw you leave the house and follow the road toward the village." Clara kept her hand near her coat pocket. "Yes, I saw her," she said. "She's safe." She needed time to think. Thomas stepped closer. His shoes crunched on the straw. "Time to think? Or time to make up stories about my family?" "I saw the records," Clara said. "The old ones in the chest. The names don't match. Henry Whitmore and Edward Grayson. They were the same man, weren't they?" Thomas's smile faded. His eyes darkened. "You've been looking where you shouldn't." "Lydia Whitmore found the same thing, didn't she?" Clara said. "She found out and tried to tell someone. Then she disappeared, just like Eliza would have if she hadn't left that note." For a long moment, Thomas said nothing. The only sound was the rain. Then he sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "Detective," he said softly, "you're very clever. Too clever, maybe. But some truths are better buried. My family was built on those truths. Without them, everything falls apart." Clara's voice was steady. "What did your ancestor do, Mr. Whitmore? Did Edward Grayson take Henry Whitmore's name after he died? Or did he kill him and steal it?" Thomas tilted his head, as if listening to distant music. "It doesn't matter anymore. The world remembers the name Whitmore, not Grayson. That's all that counts." "Maybe it matters to Lydia," Clara said, "and to Eliza." Thomas's eyes flashed. Lydia couldn't keep her mouth shut. She wanted to ruin everything. She thought truth was more important than honor. She was wrong. Clara felt a chill. "You speak of her like you knew her." Thomas smiled again, slow and cold. "We all carry a bit of our past, Miss Vance. The same blood, the same mind, the same mistakes." Before Clara could speak, he moved closer. "Where is Eliza?" he asked again. "I won't tell you," Clara said. "She's safe, and she'll stay that way." Thomas sighed. "That's a shame." Then he turned and walked out into the rain. Clara waited until his footsteps faded, then stepped outside. The night was quiet again, but she knew he wasn't far. She needed to warn Eliza. At the small inn, Eliza sat awake in her room. The lamp burned low. The storm outside had eased to a soft drizzle. Every sound made her jump, the creak of the floor, the whisper of the wind. She tried to rest, but her thoughts were restless. What if Thomas found her? What if Clara didn't come back? She went to the window and looked out. The road was empty, just shining with rain. Then she heard a knock on her door. Her breath caught. "Eliza," came a voice, low and calm. "It's Clara." Eliza opened the door quickly. Clara stepped inside, her coat dripping wet. She looked tired but firm. "We don't have much time," she said. "Thomas knows I spoke to you. He's angry, and he's looking for you." Eliza's face went pale. "How did he find out?" "He followed me," Clara said. "He found me at the old shed. He knows about the letters and the chest." Eliza's hands shook. "What are we going to do?" Clara took her by the shoulders. Listen to me. We need to leave the village tonight. There's a train that stops at the small station a few miles from here. We'll take it to London. Once we're there, you'll be safe, and we can show the letters to the police." Eliza nodded slowly. "All right. I'll do whatever you say." Clara checked her watch. "We have 1 hour. Pack what you can." Eliza wrapped the letters in a cloth and tied them tight. She put them in her small travel bag along with her purse and a shawl. When she was ready, she blew out the lamp. The two women left quietly, stepping into the cool night air. The road was empty and dark. They walked quickly, keeping close to the trees. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp and heavy. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. "Do you think he'll follow us?" Eliza whispered. Clara didn't answer right away. "I think he's already close," she said quietly. They walked faster. The path narrowed and curved through the woods. The sound of the sea faded behind them. After a few minutes, they saw a small wooden sign, "Whitfield Station, 2 miles." Almost there, Clara thought. Then she heard something behind them, a branch snapping. She turned quickly. The trees moved slightly in the wind, but she saw no one. "Keep walking," she whispered. Eliza's steps quickened. Her breath came fast. "Miss Vance," she said, "I think someone's following us." Clara turned again. This time she saw a shape moving among the trees, a tall figure in a dark coat. "Run!" Clara said. They ran down the muddy path. The figure followed, silent but fast. Their shoes slipped on the wet ground. The train whistle sounded faintly in the distance, a low, haunting cry. "We're close!" Clara shouted. The path opened onto the edge of the station. A single lamp burned near the small building. The tracks gleamed in the faint light. The sound of an approaching train grew louder. But before they could reach the platform, the dark figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Thomas Whitmore. He stood in the middle of the path, his face calm, his coat soaked. "You shouldn't have run, Eliza," he said softly. "You should have trusted me." "Stay back," Clara warned, pulling a small pistol from her coat. "Don't take another step." Thomas didn't move. "You don't understand," he said. "My family's name, our legacy, it's everything. Those letters will destroy it. I can't allow that." "Your family's crimes destroyed themselves," Clara said. "Don't add another." Eliza stepped back, shaking. "Thomas, please," she said. "You don't have to do this. We can face the truth together." Thomas's voice broke for a moment. "You were supposed to be mine, Eliza. You were supposed to stand beside me, not against me." The train whistle screamed again, closer now. The ground began to tremble as the engine approached. Clara kept her gun steady. "Let her go," she said. For a second, no one moved. Then Thomas's eyes softened. "I loved you," he whispered. He took one slow step forward. "Don't!" Clara shouted. Thomas stopped. The train roared past, the wind pulling at their clothes. When it was gone, Thomas lowered his head. "It doesn't matter," he said softly. "The past always finds us." He turned and walked into the darkness of the trees. Eliza stared after him, tears in her eyes. "Will he come back?" she asked. Clara looked at the empty path. "No," she said. "He's running from the truth now, and truth never stops chasing." She put her arm around Eliza's shoulders. "Come on, the next train will take us to London. There's more to uncover yet." Together, they stepped onto the small platform as the lights of the train shone through the fog. The train to London moved through the dark countryside. The lights inside the carriage flickered softly. Eliza sat by the window watching the rain on the glass. Clara Vance sat across from her, quiet and thoughtful. Neither woman had spoken much since leaving the village. Eliza's eyes were red from crying. "Do you think he'll follow us?" she asked. Clara shook her head. "Not tonight. He ran into the woods. He'll need time to think. But this isn't over yet. There are still questions to answer." Eliza nodded slowly. She touched the small bundle of letters in her bag. "These are all I have," she said softly. "Just Lydia's words." "They'll help," Clara said. And that family book you told me about. It's proof of something hidden. Once we show it to the police in London, they'll open an investigation. Eliza leaned her head against the cold window. I never wanted any of this, she whispered. I only wanted to be happy. I know, Clara said gently. But the truth doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it brings storms before calm. The train rocked as it sped through the night. Eliza tried to rest, but her mind stayed awake. She saw Lydia's name carved in stone, Thomas's eyes in the dark, and the sound of the sea crashing below the cliffs. She wondered if the past ever really died, or if it simply waited to rise again. By morning, the rain had stopped. The train pulled into London's Grey station with a long, low whistle. Clara helped Eliza step down onto the platform. The city was busy and noisy, carriages rattling, people shouting, steam rising from the engines. We'll stay at a hotel near the station for now, Clara said. Then we'll go to Scotland Yard. Eliza followed her quietly. She felt small among the crowds, but safe for the first time in days. The hotel was old but clean. Clara booked 2 rooms under false names, Miss Vale and Mrs. Harris. Once inside, Clara spread the letters and papers on the small desk. She had also brought copies of the old records from the chest. We'll organize everything before we show it to the police, she said. We need a clear story. Eliza poured 2 cups of tea. Do you really think they'll believe us? Clara smiled slightly. They'll believe the truth when they see it. But the Whitmores are powerful. We must be careful. Someone in London may still work for them. Eliza felt a chill. You think Thomas will come here? Clara looked out the window. He might. He won't stop easily. Later that day, they went to Scotland Yard. Clara spoke to an old friend, Inspector Reeves, who respected her work. He listened as she explained everything. Eliza's disappearance, the letters, the strange family records. Reeves studied the papers. These are serious claims, he said slowly. If true, it means the Whitmore family began with a stolen name, Clara nodded, and a missing bride who likely never returned. Reeves leaned back. We'll need to check the archives. If there's any sign of Edward Grayson or Lydia Whitmore's disappearance, we'll find it. Eliza sat quietly beside Clara, her hands folded in her lap. For the first time, she felt someone believed her. Reeves looked at her kindly. You were brave to come forward, Miss Hartwell. Many would have stayed silent. Lydia wasn't able to, Eliza said softly. So I had to. They left the station as the sun began to set. The city lights came on, one by one, glowing through the thin evening mist. For a moment, Eliza felt a strange peace. She thought of the cliffs, the sea, the white dress she never wore. Maybe this was the beginning of freedom. But that night, as she prepared for bed, a knock came at her door. She opened it carefully. Clara stood there holding an envelope. This came for you, she said. The hotel clerk said a man left it at the desk an hour ago. Eliza froze. A man? Clara nodded. Tall, dark coat. He didn't give a name. Eliza took the envelope. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting, Thomas's handwriting. Her fingers trembled. She opened it. Inside was a short letter. Eliza, you were right to leave, but you don't know everything. My family's secret is not only about names, it's about death. Meet me at the old greenhouse tomorrow at dawn. Come alone. Thomas. Clara read the note over her shoulder. It's a trap, she said firmly. You're not going anywhere alone. Eliza's voice shook. What if he wants to tell the truth? Clara's eyes narrowed. Then he'll tell it with me there. Before dawn, they took a carriage back toward the coast. The sky was gray and heavy. Mist hung over the cliffs. The old Whitmore greenhouse stood near the edge of the property, its glass walls cracked and green with moss. Clara entered first, her hand on her pistol. Eliza followed slowly. The air inside smelled of damp earth and salt. Thomas was there, waiting by a broken table. He looked tired, older, his clothes wrinkled. Eliza, he said softly. You came. Clara's voice was firm. If you're planning to hurt her, you'll have to get through me. Thomas raised his hands. No, I'm done hiding. You were right. The letters, the records, they're true. My great-grandfather wasn't Henry Whitmore. He was Edward Grayson. He killed the real Henry, took his name, his land, his bride. But Lydia found out. She tried to escape, and he made sure she never did. Eliza felt her heart twist. He killed her? Thomas nodded slowly. They said she fell from the cliffs, but he pushed her. And every generation since has kept the secret. My father told me when I was a boy. He said the family must never lose its name. I thought I could live with it. But when you found the letters, I saw Lydia's face in yours. I couldn't keep lying anymore. Clara stepped forward. Then come with us. Tell the police. Thomas smiled sadly. It's too late for that. The Whitmore name is cursed. I tried to stop the lies, but they live in me. I am his blood. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. You're not him, Thomas. You can still choose what kind of man you are. He shook his head. No, Eliza, you broke the chain. You're free now, but I can't be. Before Clara could stop him, Thomas turned and ran toward the open door at the back of the greenhouse. The cliff edge was just beyond it. The wind roared. Thomas! Eliza screamed, running after him. He turned once and looked back at her. Tell them the truth, he said. Tell them what really happened. Then he stepped forward into the mist and was gone. Eliza fell to her knees, crying. Clara reached her and held her tight. The sea below roared like thunder. It's over, Clara said softly. He chose his way. Eliza could not speak. She could only nod. Weeks later, the story filled the newspapers. Whitmore family secret exposed. Heir's death ends. Century of lies. Lydia Whitmore's remains were found near the base of the cliff, hidden by time and stone. The truth at last had come to light. Eliza stood at the edge of the sea one quiet morning. The wind blew her hair and the sun rose slowly over the water. She closed her eyes and whispered, You're free now, Lydia. And so am I. Behind her, Clara waited, her coat fluttering in the wind. Ready to go? She asked. Eliza turned and smiled faintly. Yes. There's nothing left here for me. They walked together up the path toward the road, leaving the cliffs and the old house behind. The sea kept its steady sound, soft and endless. The missing bride was no longer missing. She had found the truth, and with it herself. The truth was finally known. The Whitmore name had been built on lies, and a secret buried for 100 years was no longer hidden. Thomas Whitmore was gone, and Lydia's story was at last set free. Eliza Hartwell, once the missing bride, found her courage and her peace. As she walked away from the cliffs with the wind in her hair, she knew the past could no longer hurt her. The sea kept its steady voice, quiet, deep, and full of truth. Subscribe to Crime Loom, and join us as we unravel more heists, mysteries, and untold legends.